Welcome to It Starts With You, where we cut through the noise and get real about the behaviours that shape our lives, both personally and professionally. I'm Vic O'Farrell. Let's jump in because behaviours start with you. And welcome to another episode of It Starts With You. My guest today, Jez. Wow, this is going to be a very deep conversation. I know it already just from what we've talked about before I hit record. But rather than me introduce yourself, as I ask all of my guests, would you just like to tell our viewers and listeners what it is that you do, and all about you?
Hi, yes, good morning. Jez is my name. I currently work as a professional cybersecurity and cloud computing consultant. I've worked for the UK government, for large retail organisations, and for insurance companies, helping them to secure their online presence to reduce the chance of them being hacked. Previously, I've worked as a firefighter. I was also a police sergeant for a while, and I was in the armed forces. So it's been a long journey.
It has. I was going to ask you what moisturiser you're using there. You've had, you've. I always, people say to me, "Oh, you look younger than you are." I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't have children." I put that down too. Um, so we were introduced by a mutual speaker friend,
Yeah.
and then I've invited you on here, and you sent me your book so that I could find out a little bit more about you. Because today's conversation, viewers, listeners, is going to be around our biases and those biases that we perhaps don't know we have, or if we do know we have them, what can we do about them so that we can actually live in a kinder world? So I'm going to just up. This is Jezzy's book. Also, it's covered in sun cream there because I was reading it in the garden. Marked by Difference. It was a tough read, Jez. It was a really tough read. Not the way that you write, not your writing style, but actually realizing the biases that have come to you uh, and because of the color of your skin.
Mm.
I, when I started reading it, a couple of those very first stories of when you were a very small child, I kind of even I asked myself, was that because of the color of your skin, or was that because you actually, by the sounds of it, had some pretty horrendous foster parents? And then it was the one where you were around 11 years old
Yeah.
and two white men were having an argument. You said they were in their early 20s and you walked past and they used the N word and then beat you severely. And that's really when it made me realise this is the to do with the colour of your skin and the fact that as humans, we have biases around everything, that it's not just the colour of your skin, the colour of your hair, whether people are tall, short, fat, thin. And so every time I was reading stories, it was really unpacking lots of things for me. Do you want to tell me about your life without obviously divulging the whole book? I will pick up on some other stories, but how you have become such a grounded human based on all of these things that you've gone through.
Well, thank you for saying I'm a well-grounded human. Um, it's a difficult one, and it's something that I've started to reflect on recently over the last few years. And I think I've learned from my experiences, but I've become very risk averse.
Hmm.
And maybe that's why I do what I do for a living now, because that's about managing risk. Isn't it? I've become quite risk averse. I have become proactive in preempting issues and therefore avoiding them, which a lot of people don't understand. Even still today, I'll act in a certain way. I mean, we're going to talk in a bit, I think, about a racial profiling incident in a supermarket.
Yeah.
Well, the way I behave in supermarkets has evolved over years. I have to do things that you may not have to do. And one example would be if I walk in a shop holding something, I'll hold it up so the CCTV at the shop entrance can record me holding whatever it is. So that later, if the staff try to allege that I'm leaving the shop with something that I stole, like I say, look at your CCTV, you can clearly see I'm holding it up, the thing that I brought in. Um, Things like, some supermarkets you get free magazines,
Hmm.
where they're selling you whatever it
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Even though they're free, I will ask a member of staff if I can take it. Because if they see me pick something up and leave quickly, which has happened to me, I'll pick something up and leave. The assumption is, oh, what's he stolen? He's stealing. You can see them, and they have actually followed me out of the shop. There was an incident in Bristol where I actually looked at, I shouldn't laugh at this, but I looked at a boxed drone, decided it wasn't for me, left it where it was, left the shop, the staff came out and grabbed me. Because they're in the show, oh, you, and I turned around and then they froze. Then I realized they thought I'd stolen something because I'd left the shop without paying for something. I must have stolen it. I'm sure that there's a lot of your listeners leave shops without paying for things, but I need to be mindful of if I leave without paying for it because of what I've previously experienced, there may well be that they assume I've stolen. Sorry, leave without buying anything. So
Yeah.
they may assume I've stolen something. So
Yeah.
I'll usually pause at the entrance so the staff can have a pretend to not be looking at me, but look at me, see I'm not carrying anything. Leave me alone, because if I leave quickly, as I've explained, that happens. So yeah, I've just learned all these behaviors over time. I've learned not to be alone in the same room as certain people. Because I remember when I was a teenager, old people were terrified of me because I was there.
Mm.
I don't mean in their house. I mean maybe in the same shop. That has happened. I've been in the same shop. You can see that they're terrified. So I'll either stand the other side of the shop, stand by the staff, or go outside and then come back in when they've left.
Yeah.
Because the default, and if these things are ever looked at when the authorities are called or the management are called, it's usually a case of looking at me as the guilty party for whatever that they haven't decided yet, rather than trying to stand back and think what exactly is going in on here. Because often it's nothing, but because someone has fear due to their own biases, then I need to be more defensive. So yeah, I suppose. I mean, you say well-rounded, well-grounded. I'm not. I don't know if I am, because when I think about these behaviours that I've had to develop for survival, a lot of people I know don't have the same thing. So when they notice it, they do point it out, because they'll say, "Well, why are you doing that? Why are you holding your arms up when you stood by the door when you're leaving the shop?"
Yeah.
So the CCTV records I'm not carrying anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do I always get a receipt for a packet of crisps that I might buy some fancy snack? Because I'm leaving a shop with something that I got from the shop. And if a member of staff doesn't remember serving me, he or she may assume I've stolen it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and this was actually somebody who was once close to me reflected upon this. She said to me that she noticed that I collect receipts for everything in the shop. And she realized it's because I want to be able to prove that I've not stolen it. Whereas she said that and she's a white lady, she says that she collects receipts in case she needs to take it back because there's an issue. Two different reasons there.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's quite, like you say, powerful and eye-opening for someone, a white female to be reading all about everything that you've been through. Just picking up on what you said there, and I remember there being a story in your book about you'd taken so this is when you served in the police force as like you'd gone and taken in a God, what do you call someone that you've arrested?
You can call it a detainee.
You've taken the detainee in, but you were in plain clothes, so you weren't in uniform.
Yes.
And the custody sergeant that was booking you in looked at the other two white officers that you were with, who were also not in uniform, and basically had assumed, and we think it is because of the colour of your skin, just the way it was, that you were actually one of the detainees that had been arrested.
Yes. So I enjoyed actually that role I had in the police. I was in proactive CID. So as you've explained, we just wore everyday clothes. We didn't wear suits and we didn't wear uniform. And our role in that team was to target burglars and drug dealers, and we were regularly swearing out search warrants. So on that day, we'd sworn out. I don't know when we'd sworn out the search warrant. We executed the search warrant on that day, and we raided a house and we found illegal substances. And so, as you just said there, I was the arresting officer. I arrested the individual based upon what we found in his house. We went back to the police station. It wasn't the police station where I usually worked, although that's no excuse, but it wasn't. It was a different police station. And as you said, we walked in. There was myself, two detectives, and one detainee, actually. And so the four of us walked into the booking office, and yeah, like you said, the custody sergeant looked at me, looked at the detainee, then looked back at me and said, "You go and wait outside. I'll book your mate in first." Which, as you said, meant that he believed that me and the other guy were both detainees, that we'd both been arrested for drug dealing. The other guy was white, by the way, but he assumed that we'd both been taken in for drug dealing. And obviously, you can't book both in at the same, or they couldn't book both in at the same time. Someone had to wait, so he decided that he would book me in afterwards. I was offended by that because his alternative and what I believe he should have done was to say, "Morning, gents. Who's who here? Who's the detainee? Who's the arresting officer?" He needs to hear from the arresting officer because the arresting officer needs to explain why this person's brought in front of the custody sergeant. And that's the process. That's what the custody sergeant needs to do in order to do his or her job. They need to understand why this person's there. So the first thing would have been, as I said, who's who here, or who's the detainee, who's the arresting officer? None of that. He's, as I say, he must have just assumed because of my appearance, I must be the detainee. And yeah, I was quite offended, and I firmly said, "I don't think so, Sarge." And then, of course, he thought I was being obstructive, and he came from behind his desk, and he was a big bloke as well. Came from behind his desk, ready to, I use the words, put me in my place, which I assume would have meant forcibly remove me and put me where he felt I should be standing outside the office. And one of the detectives just stepped forward and said, "Sergeant, he's a police officer." And then the sergeant, and then quickly went behind his desk. That was a big failure from him on my part, because, as I said, all he needed to do, he didn't, if we accept that he didn't know who was who, which is possible,
Yep.
if not probable, then the first thing you do is find out by saying who's the arresting officer here, who's the detainee.
Yeah.
Yeah, but sadly, he didn't do it that way.
No, no.
He assumed I was a criminal based upon my appearance.
And that's, I think, as you say, and it comes through so much in your book about those biases that we all have. Like I say, if somebody is not as I am, and or the average of the people around me, that's, I believe, where our biases come from. I want to stay with the police. Sorry if you're watching or listening to this and you are a police officer or you serve. There's a few that stories that came through that really kind of triggered for me. There was one when you were in the Cheshire Police, and there was a family, and I think you called the son Jason to protect names, having issued FPNs, fixed
Yeah.
penalty notices. I trust you. This is a great read for learning about stuff as well. But every time it seemed to get turned over
Yeah.
by the inspector. And then there was the time when Jason made a complaint about you, and you didn't even issue the FP. You didn't even get out the car. Do you want to talk us through that story?
Yes, one of the stories that's etched in my mind. And this was during the period when I was a probationary police officer. So you're always closely supervised because you've not been signed off. So back then, police probation was 2 years.
Hmm.
This would have been before the end of my first 2 years. And so, yeah, Jason, so it was a small town in Cheshire. Jason, we'll call him, and his family were affluent, I think is the right word, and make sure I get the first vowel correct in that one. Jason and his family were affluent, so, and I think they call it socially influential, I think might be the term they use. And he was roughly the same age as me at the time, would have been mid-20s, and he had nice looking car, I guess, a Lamborghini sports car.
Very
Uh,
nice.
yeah, that he'd race around the town, and he'd be flouting all the regulations of the town and of the country basically while he was driving around. He was a regular one who would just park wherever he liked. He wasn't bothered if it caused an obstruction to other traffic or if he'd parked somewhere where it's illegal to park. That wasn't an issue for him. He felt that he was entitled to do that. And so, as we explained before the call, usually as a police officer, the first thing you will do is to deal with any problem, particularly if it's a low level one like that, you just ask them to move because that rectifies it. It's gone then, hasn't it, the issue? So first time I asked him to move, he refused, said he was too busy. So I issued him a fixed penalty notice. And this is back in the days when police were allowed to issue fixed penalty notices for traffic violations or stationary traffic violations. These days now it's the council that does it. But back then the police did it. So I issued him a fixed penalty notice, and then I found out a day or two later that his father had contacted the inspector at my station to complain about my attitude. His father had not been present at the incident. Jason was an adult, by the way. He wasn't 17, he was in his mid-20s.
Yeah.
But for some reason, his father decided he would take it upon himself to deal with the issue. And his father, who had not been present, complained about my attitude and the way I'd spoken to his son.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep repeating this, his father was not present. So his father did not see or hear the interaction. Nevertheless, he felt that it was not appropriate for me to speak to his son in the manner that I had. And as a result, the inspector decided that he should nullify the fixed penalty notice and have words with me about my attitude. Again, the inspector had not been present either. So what was interesting about that is that Jason and his father never denied the transgression. They never denied that he'd done the thing that the fixed penalty notice said he'd done. They just said that they didn't like me, didn't like the way I spoke to them. That was the first incident. Then there was a similar incident a week or three later, whereby I was actually in company with another officer, a white officer, who was an experienced police officer, or more experienced than me at that time. And again, I spoke to Jason. It's a different part of the town, similar situation. He was causing obstruction because he just abandoned his car by a junction. So I asked him to move his car. He refused. So I gave him a fixed penalty notice. And again, his father, who again wasn't present, contacted the inspector to complain about my attitude. I think it started, once again, I have to speak to you about your officer. I think that was roughly how his complaint started. Didn't like my attitude, allegedly. Didn't like the way I'd spoken to his son, even though he wasn't there. And so I was spoken to by my sergeant, and I said, well, actually, Steve, I can't remember the officer's name, but a made-up name, Steve, was with me. So the sergeant brought Steve in, and Steve said, I saw everything that Jez did. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't say anything wrong. So the sergeant, okay, well, thanks, Steve. And then he said, well, just be careful because clearly there's something going on here. And again, the inspector cancelled the fixed penalty notice. The third time, the third incident, I was with another different officer. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name I've used in the book. I can remember his real name. And I was driving the police car, and we'd gone around the corner. First thing we didn't hit, but first thing we saw was Jason's Lamborghini there where he shouldn't be. And me and the other officer go, oh, what the? And then I looked to recognize the car. I said, do you know what? I'm going to stay in the car. Can you deal with this? Because I knew what's likely to happen. So the other officer got out. He went to the car. Jason got out. He was talking to Jason. Both of them looked at me. And then Jason got back in his car and drove away. The officer came to the car, back to the car, and he said, sorted. I said, yeah. I said, well, why were you both looking at me? And he said, oh, you wanted to know what your name was. So I said, okay.
But just stop there for 1 second. So the other officer didn't have to issue him a fixed penalty notice. He actually moved away as
Yes.
he'd been asked by your other officer who was white.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So
carry on.
yeah, apparently Jason had seen me and then asked the other officer who's that, and the other officer told him, no reason not to, but he told him. And then lo and behold, a day or two later, I got another complaint again from Jason's father to the inspector, complaining about my attitude and the way I'd spoken to his son on that occasion, even though I'd not actually got out of the police car. I'd not actually spoken to, sorry, I'm getting a bit triggered. I'd not actually spoken to Jason on that occasion, yet still the family felt it appropriate, or the father felt it appropriate to complain about my attitude and the way I'd spoken to his son. It was bizarre. And once again, the inspector annulled the fixed penalty notice. And my sergeant spoke to me about it, and I said, I didn't even speak to him. I didn't get out of the car. The other officer did. And so the sergeant called in the other officer who said exactly that Jez stayed in the car, didn't speak to him. So that was when the sergeant said that he felt that Jason is being protected by the inspector. Nothing further happened about that. We never got to the bottom of why the inspector was continually allowing Jason to flaunt the traffic regulations in the town. And why it was particularly me. I mean, I'm confident enough to say that I believe his issue, why he was refusing to take my advice to move his vehicle, was because he refused to acknowledge that I had the authority of the chief constable because of my ethnicity. Whereas when white officer told him to, or asked him to do it, he was fine with it.
And it's really, and sorry that, if I'm making you trigger just by talking about it, but I find that really hard to read as well. That's why I said I find your book was a hard read, not the style of your writing, but actually incident after incident after incident, which there is another story I want to talk about, but I just want to bring it into like I say, our biases and how can we as humans recognize that we have, they're a natural thing that we have. It's the fight, flight, or freeze of is this person in front of me going to eat me, kill me, or whatever from caveman days. But how can we recognize that we have them and what can we do with them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no psychologist. I wish I could, but I do understand what you're asking about there, and we do all have biases, and that in itself, I don't think is a problem. It's what we do about it and how we act upon them or don't act upon them, and that is where the potential bias lies. Now, I mean, with Jason, I think it was too deep seated, to be honest. Um, his biases, he just refused to, and this is me looking at the situation later now, I think he just refused to accept that someone of colour could have authority over him and his family. And that's not unusual in my experience, that's not unusual with white rich families. There's other incidents which I didn't put in the book because they weren't as impacted. There wasn't enough deep story to make it worth writing about. But there's issues where rich white people have phoned up, reported a black person pretending to be a police officer. Well, that was me. The time, the location, the description fitted me. And I said, yeah, that was me. I went there to deal with that, whatever issue it was, or to speak to the neighbour about whatever. But and this was a real case when the neighbour went round to see the woman and said, who was that black person just left? And she said, he's a police officer. And the guy didn't believe it. Bearing in mind, I'd shown the woman my ID because she let me into her home. And quite rightly, she has a right to know the identity of people entering her home. So when I did turn up to her home, she asked me for ID. Politely, she asked me politely. I showed her my ID. We were good. But the neighbour decided that, no, that can't be right. And he did phone up and complain, reported a black person pretending to be a police officer had been around to visit his neighbour. Why he needed to do that, I don't know. Why he couldn't have just said, well, okay, well, it's the neighbour's home. She's seen the guy's ID. She's happy with it. Let's leave it at there. But he refused to accept it. So sometimes there's deep-seated biases that are very hard to work against. I find it easier, if you like, to talk to people who are open to understanding. Now, there's something called Batari's box. It's more about, or Batari's model, sorry, it's more about attitude and behaviour. And this fits into this. I don't know if you're aware of it. I might have got its name wrong, but it's certainly named after someone called Batari. And what that's about is that my attitude affects my behaviour. And therefore, my behaviour is going to affect your attitude. Then your attitude is going to affect your behaviour, which is going to affect my attitude, so we've got a cycle going there. Somebody needs to break that cycle. And this is usually what I do. I will step back a little bit, and I even do when writing emails, actually. If I get an email I don't like, I don't go, I just, okay, I'll leave that for an hour or so and then come back to it.
Yeah.
Need to step back and think, well, okay, there could well be something here that I don't know is going on. Seek more information. It's as simple as that. Back to the example of the police officer with the custody sergeant with his clear bias. Just seek more information by who's who here, rather than assuming, well, you've got dark skin and short hair, you must be the criminal. I mean, you might imagine if you had turned to the actual criminal and said, hello, officer, I've not met you before. That would have been, I mean, the whole thing was embarrassing happening in front of the person I'd arrested anyway. But yeah, so how are we going to deal with our biases? We just need to understand that we do have them, that it's human nature, and don't jump in a situation, step back. Don't assume, as I've experienced and many others have. I think it's in my book as well. Don't assume because a black person's running, he must be fleeing the scene of a crime. I think I've got one of those in my book as well. When I was in Stockport, and police officer saw me running, so chased me. One of them, well, he thought he was chasing me. He didn't actually catch me up because I was a good runner back then. And the other one went into the shop I'd left to ask what I'd done. And the shop staff said, well, no, you just changed some money.
That was when you hadn't bought a ticket for your car that you'd parked. So you'd gone and got the change, and then you ran back so that you didn't get a ticket. But because you'd run out of a shop.
Yeah, one chased me, and as I say, it was quite funny because he didn't actually catch me. I managed to have a bit of a rest in my car before he actually found me. So yeah, how are we going to deal with our biases? Sorry, I digress there. We just need to step back, not act impulsively, just wait, just ask. Why is this person in a hurry? I have a fast walk, for example. Why is he in a hurry? Or why is he walking fast? Oh, he might be in a hurry because he's late for work. That could be an answer rather than he must be feeling the scene of a crime or he must be a criminal or he's done something wrong. Just step back and think, well, okay, there's a lot of possibilities. I don't really have all the information. So, yeah, just
Yeah.
that's the best thing to do
Yeah.
with our biases, I guess. It is better now than it was 10, 15 years ago. Well, it's not actually. It was getting better, but then COVID and Brexit hit, but in reverse order, sorry, Brexit and COVID hit, which affected the people seem to fall back on their biases again and act in accordance with them. But things were getting better before that.
Yeah.
The majority white population in the UK were open to listening and understanding our experiences.
Let's hit pause for a second so I can tell you how I work with leaders and teams to turn behaviour into results. If your team's stuck in the same old patterns, it's not just a skill gap, it's a behaviours gap. My multitude of workshops break those patterns and build stronger, more productive teams. It starts with you, and together we'll make it happen. Yeah, I like to think I am. Well, that's why I've invited you on the show. Um, there's lots of honestly, listeners, viewers. I don't normally push people's books, but this book is one that you need to have a read of. So a couple of stories. I'm just conscious of time as well, but I don't care if this goes on longer because I think it's an important message that needs to be heard. We talk about, like you say, our biases and what can we do with them. I always talk to people and say, pause.
Yeah.
The first letter of pause is P. Get a perspective what's going on here. And even just me talking about our own behaviours, if I take it to the ground level of different personalities, don't just think that person is rude because they are direct and they're demanding and they're actually just driving for the end results of the business. And it's just that there's a clash there. But like you
Or they
say,
could be autistic.
yeah,
Yeah, or have ADHD. I know people like that, very direct,
yeah.
and if you, it's too easy to say you're a rude person. Well, no. How about we understand why? What could be affecting them? Why they're being direct? Have they had previous problems in a similar situation before, or do they have an either undiagnosed or some condition that I'm not aware of? We need to be a lot more open to people being different.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are, and that's when I said our biases are because you are not like me or the average of people around me, and that goes for so much about different human behaviors. And like I say, just to pause, I think the world is moving so fast that we don't know how to pause. We've forgotten how to take a breath.
Mm.
What's going on in this situation? Um, I do want to come and finish on the story of the supermarket you did, but there was just one other story in there, and it was about when you were in the RAF and you had your hair very short, and
Yes.
so did a colleague.
Yes. Okay, so yes, it's exactly like you said there. So I actually volunteered to join the RAF. Funny, but not so funny, separate thing about that is previously when I mentioned to people that I was in the armed forces, they assumed it was as a result of a court order because I must have done something wrong. It's just weird. The biases, as we're talking about now, lead to them jump into different understandings of situations. They didn't seem to assume that I joined the armed forces because I wanted to, because I wanted that as a career. They assumed it must have been as a result of the court order because I'd done some crime. But it wasn't. I volunteered to join the RAF. It was something that I'd wanted to do since early teens, I think. And it's military. So I had at this particular point we're talking about, I was in the habit of having my hair even shorter than it is now. It's grown out now, but I still shave it with the clippers without an attachment on. And one of the other guys who I don't remember his alias in the book, so I'm not going to mention his name, but he had the same style haircut. I was the only person of color in the team. And yes, some of my colleagues were complaining about my haircut to me vocally, saying that they felt it was an aggressive haircut. And I remember the term often used was it was an old lady frightener, saying that my haircut frightens old ladies. Well, back then there wasn't that many old ladies in the RAF, but nevertheless, that was their complaint. My peers, my colleagues were complaining that my hair was too short, it was an aggressive haircut, and it frightened old ladies. And eventually, our supervisor took me into a room and spoke to me about my haircut, and he ordered me to let it grow out and to not have it cut that short again, because according to him, it was an aggressive haircut. I was not happy with that, but it's in the armed forces, they can order you to do almost anything. So I had to accept that. And a day or three later, I spoke to another person on my team who had the same haircut. I mentioned to him that I'd been told I wasn't allowed to have it again because it looked aggressive. And he was white, and he said he'd not been told the same thing. And he had the same manager, and he'd not been told that at all. It was okay for him to carry on having his haircut the way that we did. But for some reason, it was not deemed an aggressive haircut when a white person has it, but it's deemed aggressive, an old lady, brighten hair, etc., when a person of colour has it. So this is where the rules don't, the rules are different for us. You find a lot of people of colour will say that, and I'm sure a lot of women will say that. The rules are different. We're not really an equal society. And it was just, I was just blatant discrimination that it should have been across the board for the entire team. If that haircut is an aggressive haircut, then the entire team should have been told they are not to have that. And the team wasn't just three of us. The team then was between 20 and 30 of us, due to the nature of the duties that we were on, which I'm still not allowed to talk about due to the Official Secrets Act. But yeah, it was a team of 30, so we should have all been told, by the management that no one's allowed to have the haircut that short. But it was only me who was told that.
Yeah. I just find it. Oh, I don't even have words to describe how I feel when I hear things like that. I just, like you say, we're not an equal world. Let's. I want to move on to the mindset of how you stop yourself getting angry when people are being disrespectful or even shouting in your face that they disagree with what you do. Because without the whole story in it, there was a time when you did have two officers shouting in your face. You weren't in the, I don't know if you were in the police at the
I
time.
wasn't then,
No,
no.
no.
I was off duty. I was in the Air Force, but I was off duty.
Yeah, and you had this incident where they were shouting at you, basically accusing you of trying to steal a car, your own car that wouldn't start. How did you not react? What mindset do you have that you do not react?
So I'm not going to get, like you said, I'm not going to go through the story. It's in my book. But the thing is, I've learned, so there are stereotypes out there that still are used to judge me today. I learned those from decades ago. And so what I try to do is to not feed those stereotypes. So a stereotype of people of color, particularly males of color, in fact, actually females as well, come to think of it, is that we're aggressive. So in the example you gave there, those officers were behaving aggressively towards me. Actually, to be honest, it was one officer. There was two officers there. One was behaving aggressively towards me. If I had reacted in the same way, bang, he's got an aggressive black person, which is what he already believes anyway, because of the stereotypes of things that we're fed by the media over decades, is that all black people are aggressive, violent, etc., etc. So I had to just stand there and let him exhale until his lungs were empty. And then I can't remember the exact words at the time, but I know that I am purposefully calm in these situations. I speak calmly. If I raise my voice, that's interpreted as aggression because they're already expecting that because of the stereotype. And then so back to the police officer situation, and even though I had not committed any crime, if I then become the aggressive person that he thinks I am, he can then arrest me for public disorder offences. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or even a provocation that creates the offence that wasn't there until he behaved in that way. Back to the Batari's box model, actually. So yes, and back to you were saying pause. I did pause because I'm fully aware of the risks to me. There was no risk to that officer. There was a lot of risk to me. Bearing in mind that if I was arrested, because I was in the Air Force, although I was off duty, I then had to report to my superiors that I'd been arrested by the police and I could potentially be disciplined in the
Mm.
Air Force. So there was a lot of risk to me in that
Yeah.
situation. I was fully aware of it. I had to remain calm because I didn't want to get arrested, basically, even though I felt I was being unfairly. I paused, I stepped back. Funnily enough, it was actually me who was trying to de-escalate. That's the job of a police officer.
Hmm.
He was trying to escalate. I was trying to de-escalate
Yeah.
because I know the risk to me is greater. And
Yeah.
so this is why I stay calm. This is what I try to tell my sons when you're in that situation. It's so important that you stay calm, even if you feel you're being wronged,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the risk is bigger to us as people of color than it is to that person in authority,
Mm.
because he or she will then just say, "Yeah, he was aggressive. All I did was speak to him, and he started shouting at me." The
Yeah.
officer will never, or that person will never say the reality of what they were doing.
Yeah.
So it's a learned survival technique.
Mm. And I guess just translating it without belittling that, but translating it in the fact that actually, as human nature, if someone comes up and starts shouting at you, we get defensive. It's, rabbit in headlights, right? I'm going to start shouting back again.
Yes,
And it's actually how can we pause and diffuse situations? Because otherwise they do get escalated.
they do.
Um, okay, I want to just finish with the story of the supermarket, your final one, which this is out in public. It's not something that needs to be covered up. So, do you want to tell us that story?
Yeah, that's triggering as well. It's a long story.
Well,
I'll try to
okay.
summarize.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, I don't want to trigger you, Jez. It's
No,
generous that
I'm
you're
happy to.
sharing this story, but summarize it in a way that isn't triggering for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to continue with it. And I think also it's important to lay the groundwork about, or the foundation about the kind of person I am. We've already mentioned that I volunteered to join the armed forces. I've served in the police and got promoted to sergeant and passed qualification exams to get promoted to inspector. I was a firefighter for a while, so that's the kind of person I am. And this is why it's so painful. I'm judged to be the opposite of what I am by default. And so during COVID, so I live in Wales, and during COVID, Wales had a law requiring people to wear face masks when in a public setting. And as far as I can, I obey the laws. I mean, okay, I've had parking fines, but I was more than happy, as required by law, to wear a face mask when I go shopping or any other setting, which is what I was doing on a day in Morrison's during COVID. Unfortunately, and also Morrison's store policy required it. They were quite public about that. Signs outside. Our store policy is you're going to wear a face mask in the store during COVID. So that's what I did. Unfortunately, the staff saw me enter wearing a face mask. So their first thought, from reading documentation that I still have possession of, their first thought was, there's a black guy in the store and his face is covered. Oh, and he's not got a basket or a trolley. So they followed me. Now, the reason I entered Morrison's that day, so my favourite tipple, as they say, is San Miguel. So the reason I entered Morrison's was to purchase a San Miguel. This is something I've done many, many times in that Morrison store. I would usually go in, just pick up a bottle of San Miguel, pay for it, leave, go home, drink it, enjoy it. So that was my plan on that occasion. While I was there, I noticed that they're actually doing a 2-for-1 offer. So I thought, oh, that's great. Oh, and also using a carrier bag. And that was quite common back then, because people didn't want to be touching trolleys and this, that, and the other. If they're only having a couple of things, they'd use a carrier bag to hold the stuff before paying for it. So staff were following me around the store. I decided I was going to buy 2 bottles of San Miguel, and I was going to buy some crisps, and I wanted to buy some chocolate. But I noticed that the staff were following me around the store, and they were pretending that they weren't. It was as subtle as a brick in the face, I would say. And so it was very oppressive. And I was quite annoyed because I knew that they'd decided I was a thief. And they weren't letting me shop in peace. Now, my thoughts during and since the incident is, if they felt that way, all they need to do is watch me on the CCTV. Because they do have, every supermarket has CCTV. No, we know that now. It's not something that we don't know. So all they need to do is watch me on the CCTV, and they'd have seen me pay for the things I picked up, and then would have been the end of the incident. But no, they decided to follow me around the store. There was about four of them. Heads keep popping in and out of the aisle, watching me. At some point, I went into an aisle where a member of staff was working, stocking shelves, because I went to that aisle because that's where they had some chocolate. So I stood near him, looking at the chocolate. And it was when I was at this place, I thought, you know what? I've had enough of being treated like this. So I put down on the floor the things I had intended to purchase, and I left the store. And I didn't have anything on me that I didn't have when I entered. And duty manager approached me and was to the effect of, I saw what you were doing, get out of the store now. I'm banning you. And I said, well, can we talk about this? He said, no, I can ban who I like, get out now. Well, yes, he can ban who he likes. And if you say I have to leave, I have to leave. So I did leave. But I didn't know what it was I was supposed to have done because he didn't make any allegation, false or otherwise. He didn't make any allegation. Well, it would only have been false, actually. So the same day, I contacted head office and they said that they'd look into it. And I also went to Tesco and did exactly the same shopping style and had no problem. I managed to get my San Miguel and some crisps and some chocolate. And then let's go forward. So after several phone calls, I eventually got an email from Morrison's head office, was to the effect of, we've investigated your complaint. You are now banned from all Morrison stores for life due to behaviour in the store. There was no allegation in that email. It didn't say that the staff said you did this or we saw you do that or you were trying to do whatever. No allegation, just a vague, we have a duty to protect staff and customers, which then implies violence, aggression, abusive behaviour, although they weren't actually saying that. I did a GDPR subject access request. Now, for those who don't know, under the data protection legislation, everybody's allowed to ask for copies of any information that an organisation has on them. So I applied to that for Morrison's, and I eventually received statements from 2 members of staff and CCTV coverage of me in the store. The staff statements alleged that, and I'll put these 2 statements together, they alleged that I got violent and aggressive towards the staff when they caught me trying to steal £200 worth of spirits. I don't drink spirits. I wasn't even looking at any spirits. And they also said that I filled a trolley full of products and abandoned it in the aisle. They also said that I entered the store I entered the store not carrying anything, and I entered the store carrying a foil-lined freezer bag. Well, there's a couple of things that they've done there. They tried to set me up to appear like a serious shoplifter and a violent one at that, because at the time, I think it's still enforced today, any shop thefts below the value of £200 are not taken seriously. I found that out afterwards. I thought, why are they saying why specific £200? Why not just he was trying to steal a bottle of San Miguel?
Yeah.
No, why have they been specific? So I did a bit of research. And shop thefts below the value of £200 are not taken seriously by the criminal justice system. So they're obviously trying to paint me a picture of a serious, violent criminal. Then the foil-lined freezer bag one, it used to be an old trick in shop. You've got to remember, I was in the police, so I know this. It was a trick for shoplifters to have a bag with foil lining in it because they believed that it would hide whatever they got in the bag from the security scanners at the entrance and exit to the shop. So I think that's why they said I had a foil-lined bag, even though another witness said I had nothing. And that was true, I had nothing. So when you look at the CCTV of the incident, and again, I still have the CCTV recordings, it does not show the things that Morrison's alleged. It did not show any violence or aggression from me because it didn't happen. It did not show me in possession of any spirits, let alone trying to steal £200 worth. It did not show me with a trolley. Therefore, I couldn't have abandoned a trolley full of products in the aisle. Not that that's an offence anyway. So basically, the aggressive behaviour, that's potentially an offence, but CCTV shows it didn't happen. Trying to steal £200 worth of spirits didn't happen. Trying to steal anything didn't happen. And the CCTV proved that. I went back to Morrison's and I said, you need to have a look at your own CCTV because it shows that the staff had lied. And I outlined to Morrison's head office each allegation that the staff had made and then said, you look at your CCTV and see it didn't happen. Eventually, Morrison's got back to me. They said, those statements were sent in error. They're from a different incident. However, the whole thing was your fault because you were suspicious. You were seen in possession of products to a high value. And going back to what I said, I had a bottle of San Miguel was £2 something at the time. got 2 bottles of San Miguel. They're saying that you were seen in possession of products of high value and you got aggressive towards the staff. None of that is in the CCTV. They just said that those 2 statements didn't apply to my incident. So I asked Morrison's for more statements, more and more. So I sent another GDPR request asking for any reports or statements they've got for their latest allegations and any CCTV coverage that matches it. Their response was, there's nothing else to share with you, meaning that there isn't any. So they had absolutely no evidence against me, but they still maintained that I was violent and aggressive towards the staff. But they lifted the lifetime ban as a gesture of goodwill, but it was all my fault. All because I obeyed the law. So a black person obeying the law is seen as suspicious. You know, that's why they clocked me, because I walked in the shop with a face surgical style face mask. They decided that looked suspicious. Then everything from that is, I'm sure you've heard of the term unconscious bias, or sorry, confirmation bias. Everything I did from that, they fed into, yeah, that's suspicious. So one of the things that Morrison's lawyers said in communications with me is that I changed direction within the store. So they're saying that that shows I was trying to avoid staffing customers so I could steal. Yeah, back to what I said earlier. At one point, I went and stood in an aisle close to a member of staff who was working. Is that the action of somebody who's trying to avoid staff? They said that I went straight to the alcohol aisle, which I did because I wanted to buy alcohol. That's suspicious, they're saying. Which is like saying that I should go to the freezer aisle first just to show that I'm not trying to steal alcohol. So go to the freezer aisle, do nothing, and then go to the alcohol aisle. Surely that's more suspicious because I'm wandering around the store without purpose.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, and this is what led me to write the book, to be honest, is that was kind of, I wouldn't say the last straw, but the latest straw.
Yeah.
That made me, and it really affected my mental health, Miss Morrison, the gaslighting that they've done at a corporate level. Because this was headquarters that were doing it, not the local duty manager. Despite knowing that they had no evidence to back up their duty manager, and they had evidence that they tried to ignore, that he'd lied, they still maintain his narrative. Ideally, what I would have liked when I made my first complaint is for Morrison's to look into it properly, which would have included looking at their own CCTV, and come back and said to me, they could have even denied a racial motive and just said, we don't like the way you've been treated. Something's wrong here. We're going to retrain the staff. We're really sorry about this experience.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. Instead, they dug their heels in and said it was all my fault for being suspicious, for wearing a surgical face mask during COVID and going straight to the alcohol aisle.
Which I think is what a lot of us did in COVID.
Yeah.
Jez, thank you for sharing all of this. And, you know, if I've triggered you, you know, retelling some of these stories, I apologize. But the fact that you are sharing them, you know, we need to hear them. The biases that we hold, and yes, yours is about marked by difference, the color of your skin, but we hold biases, like I said before, if somebody is different to us, and we need to be aware of them. We can't get rid of our biases. They are what makes us human beings, but we need to be aware of them so that we can either do something about it or not do something about it. You know, if I've got an opinion, I got a bias, and I know it's probably not the right, just keep it in. Keep it in and don't share it.
And going back to what we said earlier, if you do find yourself in a situation where something's presented to you that doesn't look right, just pause and maybe ask more questions.
Yeah.
Rather than just assuming that the black person in front of you must be the criminal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or when you've got a team of people and one person's a female, don't assume she's the secretary. I know I've never personally had that one, but I've seen it.
I've had that. Yeah.
When I can imagine when I've had a female boss, people have assumed that I'm the boss because I'm male.
Yeah.
I don't like that kind of thing. But it's the same kind of thing. It's the biases. And if people don't know, just ask. You know, 2 people turn up. You don't know who's in charge. You should know. But if you don't know, just say, who's the manager here, or who's the lead here, and then she'll answer. Or he'll say she's the boss, which he probably would do, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I little things like that, like you said, make it, don't show the secretary. I think I have had many a meeting when people have looked at me and gone, well, are you going to make the tea then? Like, why? Why? Because I'm the only female in the room.
Yeah.
But that's that's a side thing. This has been an eye-opening story, and I thank you for sharing. And the fact that it's in writing for those that are interested, I will make sure that in all of these show notes and whenever it's pasted out there, that there is a link so that you can buy the book, have a read, connect with Jez, and understand that I've only connected with you a few times, but you seem like a really lovely gentleman. Thank you for
Thank you.
being on my show.
I'm just trying to be me, that's all.
And you can't be anybody else, as I can't remember who the saying is. They're taken, so just be you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Jez.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, that's today's dose of truth. Now go make it happen because behaviour drives behaviour. And behaviour starts with you.